The wedding never happened. One moment I was standing at the altar, and the next, everything I had built came crashing down. There were no screaming fights, no dramatic scenes, just silence, the kind that echoes long after everyone leaves. The guests filed out quietly, whispering behind their hands. My mother cried, someone patted my shoulder, and I just stood there, frozen. When the church finally emptied, I walked outside alone. The snow that had felt magical during the proposal now looked gray and cold. I took off my veil and let it fall onto the ground. That was the last time I ever wore white. In the days that followed, I packed up everything. The apartment, the photos, the gifts we never got to open. Jake didn't call, and I didn't blame him. What could he even say? I'd destroyed his trust in one afternoon. I left the city soon after, choosing a small town where no one knew my name. I needed quiet. I needed space to figure out who I was when no one was watching, when no one was pretending to love me. The first night there, I slept on an air mattress in a nearly empty apartment, listening to the hum of the fridge and my own heartbeat. For once, the silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like truth. I got a job at a small public library, shelving books and helping kids find stories. It wasn't glamorous, but it was peaceful. No one asked about my past, and I didn't volunteer to tell it. I liked the routine, the smell of old paper, the click of the computer keys, the sound of rain against the big glass windows. I started reading again, not because someone else liked books, but because I did. It felt strange, learning my own taste after years of faking one. At first, the loneliness was unbearable. I'd come home to an empty apartment, cook for one, and sit in silence. Sometimes I missed Jake so much it felt like my chest might split open. I missed his laugh, his kindness, the version of us that could have been real if I hadn't ruined it. But I also knew that even if he forgave me someday, I couldn't go back to who I was. That girl didn't know how to love honestly. She only knew how to be what someone else wanted. Slowly, the loneliness turned into something else. Peace. I began to enjoy my walks after work, the quiet mornings with coffee, the freedom of not pretending. I started journaling, something I hadn't done since high school. The first page I wrote was simple. Who am I, really? And I didn't have an answer, but it felt good to ask. Some days I'd pass by couples laughing together and my chest would tighten with envy. But instead of feeling bitter, I started feeling hope. Because maybe someday I'd meet someone again, and this time they'd meet me. Not the version I invented, not the mask I wore. Just Emma. Messy, honest, learning as she goes Emma. Months passed before I could think about Jake without crying. I still wondered if he ever thought about me, if he ever understood why I did what I did. But I stopped waiting for his forgiveness. I realized I needed to forgive myself first, and that was harder than anything else. Some nights I'd sit by my window, whispering apologies into the dark. Not just to him, but to myself, for being so desperate to be loved that I forgot I was already enough. The library became my safe place. I'd watch people come and go, students, old couples, single moms with kids, and I'd listen to their quiet conversations. It reminded me that everyone carried something. Everyone was trying to be seen, and for the first time, I didn't feel alone in that. One day, while sorting returns, I found an old book with a line highlighted in it. Truth doesn't destroy love. Lies do. I stood there staring at it, feeling like someone had written it just for me. The old me might have cried. The new me smiled. Because finally, I understood. It took losing everything to find the one thing I had been missing all along. Myself. And for the first time in my life, that felt like enough. 6 months had passed since the wedding that never happened. Life had finally settled into something peaceful. Quiet mornings, the smell of books, and long walks home under the fading evening sky. I'd stopped checking my phone for messages that never came. I'd stopped replaying that day in my head. Or at least I thought I had. Then one ordinary afternoon, while I was shelving returns near the front desk, I looked up. And there he was. Jake Turner, standing just a few feet away, holding a book in his hand like he wasn't sure what to do with it. For a moment, I froze. My heart forgot how to beat. He looked the same, calm, steady, the kind of man whose presence filled a room without effort. But there was something softer in his eyes this time, something that wasn't anger anymore. My throat tightened as I stepped forward, not trusting my voice. He gave me a small, hesitant smile, the same one that used to melt me back when everything was still a lie. He placed the book on the counter between us and said, "I think this belongs to you." I looked down and felt my chest tighten. It was our book, the one I'd pretended to love just to impress him. The same one we used to talk about like it meant something deep, even though back then I hadn't really read it. I traced my fingers over the worn cover, realizing I finally had. Every page, every word. And this time I actually loved it. I found it when I was cleaning, he said quietly. Didn't know what to do with it at first, then I thought maybe it should go back to where it started. His voice was steady, but I could hear the emotion behind it. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. The library was silent except for the hum of the lights and the faint sound of pages turning somewhere in the back. Finally, I managed to whisper, "You didn't have to bring it back." He smiled a little and said, "Yeah, I did." Then there was a pause, the kind that held everything we hadn't said for months. I wanted to apologize again, to tell him I'd changed, that I'd finally learned who I was without pretending. But before I could, he asked softly, "If I met you again? No lies this time. Do you think I'd still fall for you?" His question hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't bitter, it wasn't sarcastic, it was real. Hopeful even. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the same man I'd fallen for. But now, I was different. This time I wasn't chasing approval or faking perfection. I was just me. My heart ached with a mix of fear and possibility. I smiled through the tears that had started to gather. "Maybe," I said, my voice trembling just a little. "But this time, it'll be for real." He let out a quiet laugh. Soft, genuine. And it was the most beautiful sound I'd heard in months. For the first time since everything fell apart, I felt something new between us. Not the illusion of fate, but the fragile beginning of truth. We stood there for a while, not needing to fill the silence. He asked if I wanted to grab coffee sometime, and I said yes. Not because I was trying to win him over, but because I wanted to share a moment honestly, for once. As he walked out of the library, the late afternoon light fell across his face. And I realized that maybe second chances don't always come to fix what's broken. Sometimes, they come to start something new. I looked down at the book in my hands one last time before putting it on the return cart. It didn't just belong to our story anymore. It belonged to who I'd become. The girl who finally told the truth, and the man who might just be ready to hear it. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I had scammed anyone into loving me. I just felt ready. I scammed my husband into liking me, and I admitted it on our wedding day. My name is Emma Reed, and I did something I still can't forgive myself for. You know when you make a mistake so big that it keeps you awake at night? That's me. I wish I could say I was young and foolish, but I knew exactly what I was doing. I wasn't drunk, I wasn't desperate, I was just tired. Tired of being the one nobody picked. Every time I liked someone, they liked someone else. Every time I tried to be noticed, I ended up invisible. Somewhere along the way, I decided if the universe wouldn't give me love naturally, then maybe I'd have to take it myself. Growing up, I was always the almost girl. Almost pretty, almost smart, almost special. My friends would get flowers, love notes, and long good morning texts while my phone stayed silent. I told myself it didn't matter, but deep down it did. It eats at you, watching people get what you've always wanted effortlessly. You start to wonder what's wrong with you. Am I too loud? Too quiet? Too much? Not enough? I thought if I could just fix those pieces, someone would finally see me. I didn't realize how dangerous that kind of thinking can be. Then came Jake Turner. He wasn't the kind of guy who turned heads at first glance, but there was something about him. Maybe it was the way he listened when people spoke, or how he never tried to be the center of attention. He had this calm, steady energy, like he didn't need anyone's approval. I met him at a mutual friend's birthday dinner. He laughed at a joke I made, and for one small second, I felt seen. But by the end of the night, he barely remembered my name. That should have been the end of it, but for me, it was just the start. Most guys flirted back when I smiled at them. A polite compliment, a teasing comment, anything. But not Jake. He was friendly, sure, but distant, like he had invisible walls around him. And that made me curious. What kind of man ignores attention? What kind of man doesn't notice when a woman is trying? The more indifferent he acted, the more I wanted to break through. It wasn't even about love at first. It was about pride. I wanted him to notice me, to choose me. Even if I had to make that choice happen myself. I started asking around about him. Subtle questions at first. I found out where he worked, what coffee place he liked, even the podcast he listened to on his morning jogs. It sounds creepy when I say it out loud, but at that time I told myself it was just research. I wanted to know what made him tick, what kind of woman he'd fall for. It's funny, when you want something that bad, your brain finds a way to make anything sound reasonable. Every little lie I told myself was a small brick in the wall I was building around the truth. Jake wasn't like other guys. He didn't play games, didn't show off, didn't act mysterious on purpose. He was just real. He didn't chase people, and he didn't seem to care if people chased him. That scared me because I was used to winning attention easily. And here was this man who didn't seem impressed. So I made a choice, a stupid, selfish choice. I decided to make him like me no matter what it took. I told myself I'd confess once he did. But the truth is, I never planned how I'd come clean. I just wanted to win. Looking back now, I realize how broken that sounds. But at that moment, it felt harmless. I thought, what's the worst that could happen? He gets to know me, and maybe he falls in love. I didn't think about how it would feel later, when every memory, every smile, every I love you would come with a shadow of guilt. I didn't think about what it would do to him, the kind of man who valued honesty above everything. I was playing with his heart like it was part of some personal experiment. I hate that version of me. You see, when you've been invisible for so long, attention feels like oxygen. The moment someone finally looks at you, really looks, it's addictive. You start doing anything to keep it. You smile wider, you change your voice, your clothes, your opinions. You stop being yourself without even noticing. That's what happened to me. Jake didn't even know me yet, but I was already rewriting myself for him. It wasn't love. It was obsession wearing love's perfume, and I wore it proudly. Every time I saw him, I studied him like a test I had to pass. His favorite jokes, his coffee order, the way he liked his weekends quiet. I started shaping myself around those things, piece by piece. My friends noticed. "You're acting weird," they said. "You're pretending to be someone else." I laughed it off. But they were right. I was pretending, and worse, I was good at it. That's the most dangerous kind of lie, the one that feels like it's working. If I could go back to that moment, the first night I met Jake, I'd tell myself to walk away, to stop trying so hard to be chosen. Because love isn't something you trick someone into. It's something you earn by being real. But back then, I didn't know that. Back then, I believed if I could just make him fall for me, everything else would fall into place. I had no idea that the day he'd finally say I love you would also be the day I'd start losing myself. I started planning everything like it was some secret mission. I found out Jake always stopped by this cozy coffee shop near his office around 8:15 every morning. So I began showing up at 8:10 sharp, pretending to scroll through my phone while keeping one eye on the door. When he'd walk in, my heart would race like I was doing something dangerous, which, in a way, I was. The first day, I accidentally spilled my coffee near his shoes. He jumped back, and I gasped like I was shocked. He grabbed some napkins and helped me clean up, smiling softly when I apologized a dozen times. That moment felt real, too real, and I told myself it was just a tiny lie. Nothing big, just a way to start a story. The next day, I did it again. Not the spilling, just the waiting. I made sure I sat where he could see me, reading a book he might like. I'd done my homework. I knew he loved old literature. When he noticed the cover of The Great Gatsby on my table, he stopped for a second and said, "That's one of my favorites." My stomach did a flip. I smiled and said, "Mine too," even though I'd never finished it. It was the first time he started the conversation, and I walked home that day feeling like I had just cheated destiny, but also like destiny didn't care, because it worked. A week later, I ran into him at the park near his apartment. I had found out from social media that he liked to go jogging there on weekends. I wasn't much of a runner, but I bought running shoes just for that. When he passed by me, he slowed down and smiled, recognizing me from the cafe. "Hey, coffee girl," he teased, and I laughed like it was the best nickname in the world. We walked a bit together, talking about random things like weather and work. I remember thinking how easy he was to talk to, and how hard it was to ignore the guilt creeping up inside me. It became a game, one I was winning too easily. Every week, I found new ways to appear in his world. I joined a local book club after I saw him post about attending it once. When he showed up at the meeting, our eyes met like it was the universe's joke. "You again?" He laughed. Guess we have similar taste. I smiled, pretending to be surprised. It was supposed to feel like luck, like something magical. But deep down, I knew it was a performance, and I was getting too good at it. Sometimes I'd tell myself I wasn't doing anything wrong. I wasn't lying about my name, my job, or my life. I was just helping fate a little. That's what I told myself when I stood outside places I knew he'd be. But at night, when I brushed my teeth or stared at my reflection, a tiny voice whispered, "You're not helping fate. You're faking it." I ignored that voice because I didn't want to face what it meant. I just wanted to feel chosen, even if I had to trick someone into choosing me. The first time Jake asked me to join him for coffee, I nearly cried. Not because I was happy, but because I couldn't tell if he was asking me or the version I'd created. He looked so genuine, so warm, like he actually enjoyed my company. When he said, "You're easy to talk to," I wanted to scream, "Easy to talk to?" He didn't know the half of it. I had studied everything about him, from his favorite authors to his coffee order. Of course I was easy to talk to. I had built myself to be that way. I started writing notes about him in my phone, like some kind of love researcher. Jake likes cinnamon muffins, hates loud talkers, always tips extra. It became an obsession, collecting little facts about him so I could mold myself into the person he'd fall for. It was exhausting but addictive. Every smile he gave me felt like proof that my plan was working. And the more it worked, the more scared I became that one day he'd see through it all. When my best friend Chloe noticed how much time I was spending by coincidence around Jake, she gave me a look. "Emma," she said, "this isn't a rom-com. This is borderline creepy." I laughed it off, pretending she was overreacting, but her words stayed with me. She wasn't wrong. Still, I couldn't stop. It was like I was building a dream with stolen pieces of reality, and even though it was fragile, I couldn't bring myself to destroy it. Jake started trusting me. He told me about his mom's health issues, his dreams of starting a small business, and even the story of his last heartbreak. I listened like every word was sacred. He said I made him feel understood, and I smiled while my heart twisted in guilt. He thought I understood him because I was kind and caring. The truth was I just knew too much. I had turned his life into my script, and I didn't know how to stop acting. When he finally said, "I'm really glad I met you," I froze. Because in that moment, he meant it, but I didn't deserve it. Every fake coincidence, every carefully planned meeting, every version of myself I'd invented had led to this. I wanted to tell him the truth, to say, "You didn't meet me? Jake, you met the version of me I made for you." But I couldn't. I just smiled back and said, "Me too." And in that tiny lie, our entire love story began. I started changing little things about myself, one piece at a time. At first, it seemed harmless. I bought a pair of hiking boots and told myself it was just for fun. I hated bugs, I hated sweating, and I definitely hated waking up early on weekends. But Jake loved hiking, so suddenly I did too. The first time we went together, I acted like I'd done it for years. I laughed when my legs ached and pretended not to be out of breath while he climbed ahead. When he turned back and said, "You're a natural," I smiled so wide it hurt. I wasn't a natural at hiking. I was just getting really good at pretending to be whoever Jake might love. He mentioned one day how much he admired people who loved history. "It's not just stories," he said. "It's everything we are." That night, I opened a new tab on my laptop and typed, "Civil War Summary for Beginners." I read enough to repeat facts and sound interested. The next time we talked, I casually brought up something about Abraham Lincoln's leadership. Jake's eyes lit up. "You read about that?" he asked. "That's awesome." I nodded, trying to hide how proud and awful I felt at the same time. Every time he complimented me, I felt like I was stealing something I hadn't earned. Soon, I started timing my reactions to his moods. If he was tired, I was calm. If he was excited, I matched it. I studied him like a test I couldn't fail. His friends called me perfect for him, and every time they did, I wanted to disappear. I wasn't perfect, I was performing. And what scared me most was how much I enjoyed it. The more he fell for me, the more I believed the lie could somehow become true if I just kept it going long enough. One night, we were watching a movie together, and one of the characters said, "You can't build love on lies." I laughed nervously, hoping he wouldn't notice the way my hand twitched. Jake just smiled and said, "Exactly. Honesty's everything." His voice was soft, but those words hit me like a punch. He had no idea that the woman beside him was built from half-truths and Google searches. I remember whispering, "Yeah, totally," while feeling my throat tighten. Every time he said he liked honest people, my chest ached a little more. It became this quiet pain that lived in me, showing up at random moments, when he kissed my forehead, when he told me he trusted me, when he said, "You're not like other girls." That last one hurt the most. Because I wasn't like other girls, I was worse. I wasn't real. I was a collection of everything he said he wanted. I promised myself I'd tell him the truth one day. "Just not now," I'd whisper when the guilt got too loud. "He'll understand later." But later kept moving farther away. I'd imagine the right moment, maybe after our 1-year anniversary, or when we were stronger as a couple, or when I could make it sound romantic, like I only did it because I loved you so much. But that perfect time never came. It was like chasing a sunset that kept sliding over the horizon. Sometimes I'd look in the mirror and not recognize myself. The girl staring back at me wore hiking boots and read books she didn't like. She spoke carefully, laughed gently, and always said the right thing. She was perfect, but she wasn't me. And yet Jake adored her. I should have been happy. Instead, it made me wonder if the real me could ever compete with the version I'd created. My friends noticed the changes. Chloe teased me, saying, "You're like a new person since you met Jake." I laughed it off, saying love changes people, but deep down I knew it wasn't love changing me. It was fear. Fear that if I stopped pretending, he'd look at me differently. Fear that if I showed him the real me, the messy, insecure parts, he'd walk away. I started to crave the truth like it was oxygen. There were nights when I almost confessed. My fingers would hover over my phone, ready to type a message that said, "Jake, there's something I need to tell you." But I always deleted it. What if he thought I was crazy? What if he left? The thought of losing him felt unbearable, even though I was already losing pieces of myself every day. By the time I realized how deep I was in, it was too late. I wasn't just pretending anymore. I had built my whole relationship on lies that felt too fragile to touch. Every time Jake looked at me with love in his eyes, I smiled back, silently begging the universe not to let it all collapse. Because I knew that when the truth finally came out, it wouldn't just break his heart, it would destroy mine too. It happened so quietly that I didn't even notice it at first. Somewhere between all my careful planning and fake coincidences, I stopped pretending. The laughter became real. The way Jake listened, really listened when I talked, it melted something inside me I didn't even know was frozen. He'd ask about my day like it mattered, hold doors open, remember small things I said. I had started this whole thing as a trick, but now I was the one caught in it. I'd stare at him sometimes, watching how his eyes crinkled when he smiled, and think, how did I ever think I could control something like this? Love wasn't supposed to be a plan, but somehow it had found me through one. One evening, we were walking home after dinner, and Jake told me about his ex. His voice got quiet when he said her name. He explained how she lied about small things at first, where she was, who she talked to, until the lies got bigger. It wasn't even what she did, he said, looking down. It was that she thought she had to pretend for me to love her. My heart clenched so hard I could barely breathe. Every word felt like it was aimed straight at me. I wanted to grab his hand and say, "That's me. I'm doing that to you right now." But instead, I just squeezed his arm and said, "That must have hurt." It was the most cowardly thing I'd ever done. That night, I cried in the shower. Not the quiet kind of crying, the kind that comes from your chest when you finally realize how deep you've gone. I wasn't just guilty anymore. I was in love. Completely, stupidly in love with the man I'd tricked into noticing me. I thought about how easily he laughed, how he always carried an extra sweater in case I got cold, how he looked at me like I was someone safe. And it broke me because I knew I wasn't. He thought he'd finally found honesty again, but all he had was another lie dressed up as love. I started noticing small things that made me ache. The way he'd say, "You're different," like it was the highest compliment. The way he trusted me without hesitation. The way he'd tell me, "You make me feel at peace." Those words were supposed to make me happy, but instead they tore at me. He didn't know that peace was built on my deception. I'd go home after every date feeling like a thief, one who stole something precious and smiled while doing it. There were moments when I almost confessed. Like the night we were driving home from a movie and he said, You're the most honest person I know." My throat tightened so much I could barely speak. I laughed, hoping he wouldn't hear the shake in my voice. I wanted to tell him everything, right there, on that empty road under the streetlights. But I didn't, because for the first time in my life, someone loved me, even if it wasn't really me. It's strange how lies can start to feel like truth when you repeat them long enough. Every time Jake smiled at me, every time he said my name softly, I convinced myself it was okay. That maybe, somehow, this version of me could become real if I just kept pretending. I told myself I'd tell him later and when the time was right, when he'd understand. But later became a moving target, always just out of reach. And the deeper his love grew, the harder it became to risk losing it. One afternoon, he surprised me with a framed picture of us from our first hike. "You look so happy here," he said, brushing his thumb over the photo. I stared at the image, me smiling, sun in my eyes, pretending to be the girl he wanted. He was right. I did look happy. Because back then, I was still pretending I was in control. But by then, I wasn't. My own lie had swallowed me whole, and I didn't know who I was without it. Sometimes I'd wonder if maybe love wasn't supposed to be built on truth, but on the hope of it. Because even though everything between us started with a scam, the way I felt for him, that wasn't fake. The way my heart raced when he looked at me, the way my voice softened when he spoke my name, all of that was painfully, terrifyingly real. And that's what made it worse. I used to think falling in love was supposed to make you feel light, like floating. But with Jake, it felt heavy, beautiful but weighted with guilt. Every sweet word he said made my heart ache. Every kiss felt like both a gift and a punishment. It's strange, loving someone while knowing that one truth could destroy everything. I started to wonder what hurt more, lying to him, or imagining what would happen when I finally told him. By the time I realized I wasn't pretending anymore, it was too late to fix it. The girl he loved wasn't me, not really. But I loved him more than I'd ever loved anything in my life. And that's the cruelest part of it all. I'd built this love on a foundation of lies, but the feelings that grew out of it were the only thing that was ever true. The day Jake proposed felt like a dream I didn't deserve to be in. It was late December, snow drifting down like tiny feathers outside the cafe window. The same cafe where I'd first accidentally spilled my coffee on him. Everything about it was too perfect. The twinkle lights, the smell of cinnamon, the soft hum of Christmas music. I didn't know what was coming until he reached across the table, his hands trembling slightly. When he pulled out the ring box, my entire body froze. People around us started to notice, whispering, smiling. My mind screamed, no, but my heart whispered, don't ruin this. He got down on one knee right there between the coffee tables and said, "Emma, you are the most genuine person I've ever known. You make me believe in honesty again." My heart nearly stopped beating. Those words, most genuine, hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to scream, "I'm not genuine, Jake. You just don't know me well enough to see it." But the room was filled with clapping and gasps, and everyone's eyes were on us. My lips trembled, my throat tightened, and I forced a smile. "Yes," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The moment the ring slid onto my finger, I felt both weightless and crushed. Everyone around us was cheering, but their joy sounded distant, muffled, like I was underwater. Jake stood up and wrapped me in his arms, his voice shaking as he whispered, "You make me so happy." I wanted to say it back. I really did. But the words got trapped behind my guilt. I kissed him and people cheered louder. But in my head, all I could hear was the echo of my own lie. On the drive home, snow was falling harder, covering the streets in quiet white. Jake was humming along to the radio, tapping the steering wheel with his ring finger, smiling like he'd just won the world. And I just sat there, tears streaming silently down my face. Every red light felt like a confession I couldn't make. He noticed I was quiet and asked, "You okay?" I nodded, pretending I was crying out of happiness. "I'm just overwhelmed," I said. And that wasn't even a lie, just not the truth he thought. That night, I stood in front of the mirror, staring at the ring on my finger. It was beautiful, simple, silver, with a small diamond that caught the light. I should have felt lucky. I should have felt chosen. But instead, I felt trapped. That ring wasn't a symbol of love anymore. It was proof of how far my lie had gone. Every sparkle reminded me of the first fake coincidence, the first little trick, the first time I told myself, I'll tell him later. Later had turned into a proposal, and now there was no way out without breaking both our hearts. I sat on my bed, holding the ring in my palm, and whispered, "You deserve better, Jake," but saying it didn't make it true. Because even if I wanted to let him go, I couldn't. He wasn't just someone I loved. He had become the only person who made me feel like I mattered. I told myself that maybe, somehow, I could make things right by being the woman he thought I was. Maybe if I loved him hard enough, it would erase how it all started. Over the next few days, we told our friends and families. Everyone was thrilled. My mom cried, saying, "He's perfect for you," and I smiled like I agreed. Jake's mom hugged me and said, "I'm glad my son found someone so honest and kind." Honest. The word twisted in my chest like a knife. I smiled and hugged her back, trying not to shake. If only she knew that her son's honest and kind fiancé had built their relationship on a lie that started with spilled coffee and a fake coincidence. I kept replaying the proposal. In my head, the sound of people clapping, the look in Jake's eyes, the way my hands shook when I said yes. It should have been the happiest day of my life. Instead, it felt like standing on a frozen lake, smiling while I heard the cracks forming beneath my feet. Every time I looked at the ring, I saw not love, but evidence. Evidence of the story I created and the truth I buried under it. At night, I lay awake beside him, listening to his steady breathing, wondering what it would feel like if he knew. Would he still look at me with that softness in his eyes? Would he still believe I was genuine, or would he see me as the same kind of liar who broke him before? The thought made me want to scream and disappear all at once. But I didn't move. I just lay there, silent, pretending everything was perfect. The next morning, he kissed my forehead before leaving for work and said, "I can't wait to spend forever with you." And I smiled again, because that's what I did best. Pretend. But as the door closed behind him, I sank to the floor, shaking. I had everything I thought I wanted: his love, his promise, his forever. And yet, I'd never felt emptier. The closer the wedding got, the heavier everything started to feel. My thoughts, my heart, even the air around me. I couldn't sleep. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, counting the days until I had to walk down that aisle and say "I do" to a man who didn't even know the real me. Every night I told myself, tomorrow I'll tell him. I'll come clean before it's too late. But when morning came, the fear was louder than my guilt. What if he left? What if everything we'd built vanished? I kept thinking that maybe if I just went through with it, maybe love would somehow forgive the way it began. But deep down, I knew better. At every dress fitting, I felt like a fraud wrapped in white. The gown was beautiful. Lace sleeves, soft satin, a trail that shimmered like snow. Everyone said it made me look like a princess. But when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a bride. I saw a liar in disguise. The fabric felt too tight, like it knew the truth pressing against my skin. I remember standing on that little pedestal while the seamstress pinned the hem, smiling for the camera as my mom took pictures, pretending to be excited. But inside, I felt like I was standing in quicksand, slowly sinking while everyone around me clapped. The rehearsals didn't help either. Every time I walked down that aisle, my chest got tighter. The music was supposed to sound romantic, but to me, it felt like a funeral march. Jake would flash me that sweet, trusting smile at the end of the aisle, and I'd smile back, pretending I wasn't seconds away from breaking down. "You're nervous," he said once, holding my hands. "That's normal." I nodded, biting my tongue before the truth slipped out. It wasn't normal. I wasn't nervous. I was terrified. Everyone around me kept saying how happy I must be. "You're glowing. You're so lucky. He adores you." I smiled at all of it because that's what people do. They smile. But the truth was, I felt like I couldn't breathe. Every compliment felt like a reminder of the person I was pretending to be. They didn't see the sleepless nights, the panic attacks in the bathroom, the way I cried every time I looked at the wedding invitation with both our names printed in gold. To everyone else, I was living a dream. To me, it was a countdown to disaster. The night before the wedding, I sat on my bedroom floor surrounded by wedding gifts and cards. One of the cards from Jake's mom said, "Welcome to the family. I know you'll take good care of him." I pressed it to my chest and started sobbing. The guilt was eating me alive. I didn't just lie to Jake, I lied to everyone who believed in us. Every fake coincidence, every pretend hobby, every half-truth had led to this moment where I was about to stand in front of people and promise forever. How do you promise forever when your whole beginning was built on lies? I tried on the wedding dress one last time before going to bed, just to see if it would finally feel right. It didn't. The moment I zipped it up, it felt like it was suffocating me. The lace pressed against my skin, the veil itched at my neck, and I could barely move. I remember looking in the mirror and whispering, "This isn't me." My reflection stared back. Perfect, composed, beautiful. Everything I had worked so hard to become. But behind the makeup and fabric, there was a girl who just wanted to be loved for who she really was. When Jake called that night to say, "I can't wait to see you tomorrow," my heart nearly broke. He sounded so happy, so sure. I said, "Me too," and hung up before he could hear the tears in my voice. I wanted to tell him the truth so badly it physically hurt, but I was afraid that one confession would destroy everything. I told myself maybe I could tell him after the wedding, when it was just us, when he already knew I loved him. But I think I knew even then. There's no right time to tell someone their love story started with a lie. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat by the window, watching the streetlights blur through my tears. My wedding dress hung on the door like a ghost watching me. I kept thinking about how everyone says wedding dresses are heavy because of all the fabric and layers. But mine wasn't heavy because of that. It was heavy because it carried every lie I'd ever told, every fake smile, every time I said later instead of now. By morning, my eyes were swollen and my heart felt bruised. My mom knocked on the door, smiling, saying, "It's your big day." I forced a laugh and said, "Yeah, it is." But as I looked at the dress again, I realized the truth. I wasn't walking toward a happy ending. I was walking toward the moment everything would finally fall apart. And maybe deep down, that's what I wanted. Because I couldn't keep living like this. The dress might have been beautiful, but to me, it felt like a confession I was too scared to speak. That morning, I woke up before the sun. The room was still dark, quiet, heavy, like it already knew what I was about to do. My heart was pounding before my feet even touched the floor. I could hear my bridesmaids laughing in the next room, talking about how today would be the best day of my life. But all I felt was fear pressing on my chest. I walked to the mirror and stared at myself. The girl looking back didn't feel like me. She looked like someone who had been pretending for too long, someone who had lost track of where the truth ended and the lie began. The dress hung off my shoulders like a secret I couldn't carry anymore. Everyone said it was the dress of dreams, but to me it felt like armor, heavy, tight, and suffocating. Every lace detail reminded me of the lies I'd stitched into my story with Jake. I remembered the first time he told me he loved me, how I smiled back even though I knew he didn't really know who I was. That memory cut deeper now. I brushed my hair, painted my lips, but no amount of makeup could cover what I felt inside. Guilt, pure and raw. My mom came in for a moment, her eyes shining with joy. "You're glowing," she said, adjusting my veil. I wanted to tell her that the glow was just panic, that my chest was burning with shame. But I couldn't ruin her happiness too. So I smiled, that same fake smile I'd perfected over the years, and then nodded. When she left, I broke down. The silence in the room swallowed me whole. My reflection blurred through my tears, and I whispered, "What have you done, Emma?" I reached for the vow book on the vanity. My hands trembled as I flipped it open. Each line felt like poison. "You're my destiny. You're my home. You make me want to be honest." Honest. That word nearly made me laugh and cry at the same time. I read it again and again until I couldn't anymore. Then I grabbed a pen and started crossing out every line, the ink smudging under my tears. It felt like erasing parts of my lie, one sentence at a time. When I got to the end, there was nothing left but a blank page. My chest felt lighter, but my heart still hurt. I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty paper, knowing that what I wrote next would change everything. Finally, I took a deep breath and wrote the only thing that was true. "I need to tell you the truth." Just 7 words. But they felt like the heaviest words I had ever written. The door creaked open slightly, and my maid of honor peeked in. "You okay?" she asked, smiling. I nodded quickly, hiding the page under my hand. "Just nervous," I lied. She laughed softly, said something about cold feet, and left again. The door clicked shut, and I exhaled shakily. My hands were still trembling, but my decision was made. I couldn't walk into that ceremony pretending to be someone else anymore. Outside, I could hear the guests arriving. Laughter, chatter, music. It should have made me excited, but instead it made me feel trapped. Every voice sounded like a reminder of the lie I was about to marry. I thought of Jake. How happy he must be right now, how sure he was about us. I wanted to protect that happiness, but not at the cost of his truth. He deserved to love a real person, not a version I created. The makeup artist came back one last time, fixing my lipstick and saying, "You look like a princess." I wanted to say, "I don't feel like one," but instead I just nodded again. My throat was too tight to speak. She left and I looked at myself once more. My eyes were red, but I didn't care. I didn't want to look perfect. I wanted to look honest. I stood up slowly, holding my vow book against my chest. The dress felt even heavier now, as if it knew I was about to tell the truth inside it. I walked to the window and watched people taking their seats below. The world looked so peaceful, so unaware of the storm building inside me. I whispered, "You can do this," even though I wasn't sure I could. Then came the knock on the door, 3 light taps. "It's time," someone said. My stomach dropped. I glanced at the mirror one last time. The reflection staring back at me was scared, but finally real. For the first time in months, I felt like Emma again. Not the version Jake fell in love with, but the girl who was finally brave enough to tell the truth. I picked up my dress, took a deep breath, and walked toward the door. When I stood at the altar, my knees were shaking so badly that I thought I might fall. The church was glowing with soft lights, everyone smiling, waiting for me to speak. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out everything else. The music, the whispers, even my own thoughts. I looked at Jake. He was smiling, eyes warm, completely unaware of the storm about to hit. For a second, I almost wanted to stay silent, to just say the vows and live the lie forever. But my throat wouldn't let me. The truth had been waiting too long. When it was my turn to speak, my mouth went dry. The paper with my vows felt heavy in my hands, like it knew what was coming. My voice cracked before I could even begin. The crowd shifted quietly, thinking I was just emotional. But it wasn't love that was making me tremble. It was guilt. Jake reached out and gently touched my hand. And that small act of kindness shattered the last bit of strength I had left to pretend. "I can't marry you without telling you something," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. A few people chuckled softly, thinking it was some kind of sweet story about nerves. But then I looked up right into Jake's eyes and he saw it. The fear, the shame, the truth. His smile faded. My stomach twisted and my entire body felt cold. There was no turning back now. "I haven't been honest with you," I continued, my voice shaking. I could hear my heartbeat echoing in my ears. Our first meetings, the coffee shop, the park, the bookstore, they weren't accidents. The room fell completely silent. I could feel every pair of eyes on me. My mom gasped somewhere behind me, but I couldn't stop. "I planned them. I made sure you'd notice me. I learned what you liked, pretended to share your interests. I made you believe in fate." Jake didn't move. He just stood there, frozen. His face went pale, his jaw tense. I wanted to stop talking, but the words kept spilling out. "You once told me your ex lied to you," I said, tears sliding down my face. "And every time you said you were grateful to finally find someone real." It broke me a little more, because I wasn't that person. I was the lie you thought you escaped. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Oh my God," and I could feel the air change. It was thick, heavy, full of confusion and judgment. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped my vow paper. It fluttered to the floor like a piece of me had fallen apart with it. I looked back at Jake and he still hadn't said anything. Just silence. The kind that feels louder than a scream. "I scammed you into liking me," I said softly, barely able to get the words out. "And I'm so, so sorry." I could taste the salt of my tears as I said it. For a moment, I thought maybe he'd say something, anything. I thought maybe the man who always believed in second chances would try to understand. But he didn't. He just looked at me, his eyes full of hurt and disbelief. The priest cleared his throat awkwardly. A bridesmaid started crying. My mom covered her mouth. The sound of someone's phone buzzing in the back of the church filled the silence like a cruel reminder that life outside this moment still existed. I stood there waiting, hoping he'd ask why or tell me he needed time. But he didn't. He turned away. Jake stepped back slowly, his eyes never leaving mine until he finally looked at the floor. He didn't shout. He didn't curse. He just shook his head, whispered something I couldn't hear, and walked down the aisle. Every step he took felt like a piece of my heart tearing away. The guests didn't know whether to follow him or stay. No one moved. No one spoke. I stood there alone at the altar, in my white dress, holding nothing but regret. The silence was unbearable. My body felt hollow, my chest tight, but somewhere deep inside, I knew I had done the only right thing left. The truth had cost me everything, but at least it was finally out.